Hey Nerdpreneurs, this is part 2 of our time management discussion. If you haven't listened to part 1, I recommend checking that out first. It's the episode right before this, but I will link it in the show notes. I'll also put a link to the article that we keep referencing in the discussion, along with other recommendations that we actually have throughout the episode as well. Now here's today's Talking Nerdy.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
Now, I'd like to move on to the next aspect of this article that I wanted us to talk about.
Cool. Well, hopefully I can get into some of the other good efficiencies I have around this. So,
Well, you're going to love this next one, I bet. Brought back by popular demand, the next one is regarding good rest. So getting into a regular sleep routine is actually something I appreciated about this article. It's a nice little reminder because I always aspire to fall asleep before or at 10. That's my thing, because then I wake up at around between 5 and 6. That's what I like to do. That's me. That's my own thing. You, it's different, I'm sure. But I don't always hit that. And I am forgiving of myself. And my therapist says it's an opportunity to practice self-compassion. And I find it is. It indeed is. So for me to get I want to know what your way of doing this to cultivate like a good space of rest for yourself. Because for me, it's a lot of making sure, like I said, that I'm getting ready, I'm winding down around the same time. But I also have this routine where I stretch before bed. I do, calisthenic kind of stuff where it's like I gradually stretch from the head down to the feet. And by the time I'm at my feet and my lower back, I'm laying down. So I start standing, I go sitting, and then I lay down. And by the time I'm laying down, I'm like, I am nice and mellowed out and my body's relaxed. And now I'm already laying down. And that's the last thing I do before going to bed. And that really helps me wind down.
I think sleep's super important. It is. It may not seem like I think it's important, but it is. I've been burned out. I've gone down that path of like low sleep, pushing myself long periods of time. I used to do that, and back when I was in my early 20s, I also had the energy in which to be able to push myself at a high level, but also acknowledging that that is not a sustainable thing for my whole life, nor would I want to be able to do that for the rest of my life. But was there times when I'm willing to get slightly less sleep to be able to get more productivity or to be able to be present for the most important aspects of what's necessary for me to do in the next month or whatever? Yes, there are times where I sacrifice. But I do believe that, what we lack in sleep can sometimes just show up in lack of productivity too, because then we're harder to focus. Our body doesn't work as well. Like that includes, and by the way, that's not the only thing, sleep. Like to me, it's also being active. Like I find if I'm not active and working out or doing some form of activity, whether it be doing disc golf and walking a bunch, like 10,000 steps every day, or if I'm not running, I used to run a lot. That was actually one of my big things back in my early 20s. But you have to have these places to replenish yourself, and revitalize. You can't work all the time. There are times when we got to work a lot, but it's always temporary, at least in my mind. Like don't sign up for the thing that's 12 hours a day for 365. Like that just doesn't work. But if you can push yourself for 2 weeks, right, and then you have a vacation afterwards, that's a very different thing. It's
You're
like
getting ahead of things, Chris. You're talking about leisure. We're not at leisure. We're talking about rest right now. Come on, man.
Leisure and rest is almost the same thing to me. It's about decompression, right?
Not
It's
quite.
about getting.
No. We're talking about like when I say rest, I mean sleep, like the sleeping type of rest. I love what you're saying, Chris, but like, come on. As a man of structure, that belongs in like 10 minutes from now.
But we're not even worried about leisure, I guess. But what I'm saying is sleep and leisure to me all sort of, I know they're putting them into two separate categories because one's 8 and one's another 8, right? And it just so happens. But the question I would ask about sleep is how many hours of sleep do you need personally in order to have your best day the next day?
Yeah.
And for some people, that's 8 hours. Some people, I know it's 7 hours. Like me, I think about 7 to 7.5 hours is actually the perfect amount for me based on my experience. 8 sometimes is a little too much.
I would agree.
Actually.
I would agree.
And so there's things like that you should be aware of when you're planning. And 6 hours I can function, but I'm gonna be a little. I might need a little coffee, you know. Whereas when I get down to like the minimum amount of sleep, it's like 4 hours. I can function, but I'm not going to be at my peak. And if I'm any less than that, it's going to be very hard,
Yeah.
very difficult, you know, or I'm giving up. I'm giving up a lot. So there are things you should know so you can make those calculations based on where you are in your life at different times and say, oh, how much sleep do I need? At least that's how I think about it. And the ideal is try to get that ideal as many times as you can in a week.
So, rapid fire question for you in 3 words or less. What is Chris's preferred way to wind down before bed?
Read a book.
Beautiful.
Read Moby Dick. If you haven't read that, it goes on and on and on.
Rambly AF.
I actually have been reading Moby Dick the last 6 months or so, and it's short chapters, which is surprisingly useful. And nothing really happens in the book. In case you're wondering, like it's a book that meanders and takes a long time to get through, but there is something to the way the cadence works. And I read it to my girlfriend as we're heading to bed, and she passes out right away, which is great because she gets great sleep. And then I get to kind of wind down in that last like 10 or 20 minutes, whatever it takes for me to go through the chapter, and get that mind to be just like, seafaring, whaling, whales.
It's convenient that there's not a lot that happens because if she falls asleep, then the next day when you do the same activity before bed, she doesn't feel like she missed out on anything because the book
Yeah,
doesn't really progress.
no,
Perfect.
it's a bit, if you want something that's an overextended metaphor, it is the ultimate overextended metaphor. So I don't know what we're gonna read afterwards, but
Don
it's
Quixote. That's the
yeah,
next one I'd
maybe.
recommend because I wonder how it stacks up. And you're going to be my guinea pig. Tell me, because
Yeah,
I'm not going to read Don Quixote.
we'll see. I have a couple on deck for the next one. We'll see though. Maybe Don Quixote.
All right. Now, the final one.
The final one. Oh, there's more in this article.
There's one last section because remember, there's work, sleep, and leisure. So now we're going to
Okay.
talk about leisure. And I think actually something you said is very true. It's very closely tied to sleep. I think that's a great point that a lot of what we choose to do in our leisure time will directly impact our sleep, quality of sleep. So, this talks about 8 hours of leisure. And I think this is the category that gets the short end of the stick. It always has to or sleep. Sleep is the second one. But like I was talking about, when you got to commute to your work, you got to, make food for yourself, the kids, the family. Like this is usually the area that suffers. And you feel lucky if you get like 30 minutes to yourself or even 10 for some folks, especially if people are, in a family and taking care of everybody. So I want to know what you think about if this is accurate for people, if 8 hours a day is even attainable. I mean, I've already said what I think, but I also think that there's a lot of small ways people can put leisure into their activities. Like when you're going to and from work, you might listen to a podcast you enjoy. That's a really common example I hear people talk about.
You
Or
might even listen to a nerdy
or
podcast.
nerdy podcast, or you're listening to an book, audiobook. There's different ways to get that leisure. And like you said, with exercise, I think being active directly and positively impacts your sleep unless you're exercising right before bed. Then that can be a
It
detriment.
basically impacts everything. Like there's one thing that pretty much every study, doctor, and university says affects longevity in life, and that's moving, like activity, physical activity. It has a beneficial impact on your life. So yeah, you should be moving and getting that done on a day-to-day, at least week-to-week basis.
Yeah. In this article, there's 3 different categories for leisure. I'm not going to go in detail on them, but I want to just read them out to you real
They
quick.
love threes, eh?
Oh,
This is
yeah.
just
Oh,
like,
get this. Not only is it 3 categories, but in each category, there's 3 things, and each
oh
of them start
gosh.
with the same letter. So the first one is 3 F's: family, friends, and faith.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, 3 H's: health, hygiene, and hobby. I think that ties into the movement and activity. And then the last one is 3 S's: soul, service, and smile. I feel like, it feels a little cringy saying all of this at times, but there are, like I said, granules of wisdom within this that I do appreciate. Family, friends, and faith. Spirituality. I think that's a really good one. Although spirituality actually I think falls under the S's at the end there. But as far as like being social with friends and family, that's a good reminder for me, because it's very easy for me to fall into my introverted tendencies where I just do my activities on my own over and over. And then 3 H's: health, hygiene, hobby. Yep, we do a lot of that, hobby being this podcast and being active. And then the 3 S's: soul, service, and smile. The service, I don't really know what that means.
I think we got to change that. We can't be calling this a hobby.
Calling this a hobby.
Yeah, you can't call this a hobby. We just like I just really think that we can't be thinking about it like that as a nerdpreneur. I just think words are powerful, and so
What, side
I
hustle? Like,
no, we just have to. It's like what we do. It's one of our. I wouldn't necessarily place this in the category of like, oh, hobby. Like it feeds our soul, sure, but like the intention, the hobby to me seems to me more. The hobby is something that you don't intend for it to go and be something that like say makes money or becomes your lifestyle or becomes all these things. Like it's like I know what you're saying and when you say hobby, but like I just think that's bad juju on the podcast when we refer to it as a hobby. It's not a hobby. It's a gateway to a bigger life and a bigger impact.
I agree that it's definitely a great impact to people. But I also, I've told you this before, from my interactions with people on X, Twitter, there's podcasters specifically, they do a lot of podcasting for years. And I feel like they barely have a community. I feel like they barely scratch the surface. Just the podcasting game
Stop
is
hanging and
brutal.
talking to mids. Seriously, like I'm not joking. You gotta get out of that mentality of what other people do is what we do. We're so much better, and we will be better. Like you don't have an average person with you, and you're not an average person either.
They
Most people
definitely
fail.
they
Most people
definitely
give up.
don't change a lot of there's plenty of them that don't change what they do, but it's pretty staggering.
And the reason why is they say, "Oh, let's be fine as a hobby," and then they start doing their 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, and guess what? They don't go where they want to go. This is mental stuff. This is like, and I'm telling you, the mental stuff matters.
Yeah,
Matters a
I
lot.
agree. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate that words are power in the way that we see them. And I understand what you mean by calling it a hobby is a detriment. It's cutting itself and myself short. I get what you mean, but it's pretty striking what you see out there. If you're not a celebrity, a podcast struggles.
That's okay. I hear what you're saying, but again, nobody's a celebrity until they are one.
Or they're a celebrity that decides to start a podcast.
Yeah. Or there are lots of podcasts of people who are just, well, they're not nobodies, but they're successful and they provide value and they create value and then they become somebody and create their own communities. Most podcasts are trash. That's why they're there where they are. Like if you go listen to the podcasts who say like, "Oh, we've been doing this for 6 years," it's not good. That's why they're not going anywhere. I know that already. Like
Well,
if
I
they're
mean, yeah,
good
statistically that
and
makes
they've been doing
sense.
it well, they will go somewhere.
Yes,
It
exactly. Statistically, if they've been doing it for 6 years and it is going nowhere, it's not very good, or there's no audience. I mean, I we almost talked about the other day. We almost talked about Joseph Campbell on the pod, and that was
we're gonna have to
interesting.
do that next time because we're
Yeah,
running lower on time. But yeah, we should.
because
We should definitely talk about that.
I almost did a YouTube series breaking down Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces chapter by chapter, but I then did research. I was like, nobody nobody searches for this.
No.
Nobody's done this, and nobody is searching for it.
Well, I don't think that anybody, yeah, nobody's searching for it. But also, I think the other thing is like, if you take what Joseph Campbell teaches and then apply it to marketing,
Oh yeah.
then all of a sudden you have a real gateway into making something big with what you're doing.
Yeah, the audience is the hero. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, who's the author? Donald Miller. Donald Miller has a Story Brand. He did a book called Story Brand that's all about that. It's essentially because he used to be a screenwriter, and he takes that and he brings it to marketing and running a business and how to build a website around that. And yes, exactly, the customer being the hero and you being their guide. Totally.
Mhm. The hero's journey. And, some of us, when we are launching products, we're the reluctant hero. Like, like I know there's people who want us to say, do stuff around, creating courses or creating, a mastermind, or want us to, do coaching or other things. And it's just like, there are ideas I have, and I'm looking into how to do that. But again, this comes down to time and management and return on investment. So, yes, we are building something here and we're growing. And there is an unlockable thing that's going to be coming to provide more value to people who are listening, and providing more that they can be able to opt into and get. But figuring out how that's going to work so that lifestyle for both of us, because we both have really sick lifestyles. Like, I think that that's the other thing, is we're not two broke dudes hoping that this thing pops off. Like, we both have great freaking lifestyles, living on the West Coast, doing awesome stuff in our lives, great people with us, and it's awesome. So like, it's not like, oh, I have to make this thing work. Like, I want to make it work. I want to be able to share what we're doing and make this bigger, because I think the impact we can have is greater, and more people should be able to know they can pursue their passions and have epic lives. I actually think the future is bright, and the future is going to be great versus bad. There's a lot of people out there that are in the opposite. They just see the future being worse and it's all going to get tanked. And that story needs to change. But we're not, we're unlocking that combination lock of success right now. And we might have two of the numbers, and we need that third number for it to unlock fully. And that's what we're working on this year. We've been doing this 1 year, second year, third year, and every year we're getting better and stronger, and more is coming out. And I'm telling you, man, like, thinking about it like hobby versus like actual impact business, like future, like the future of us, like future of where we are, where we're going, that stuff matters. And it matters for all the entrepreneurs who have that same vision down, who are listening to this. That, if your business is your hobby, cool. But if your business is not your hobby, it's what you want, it's your business, you have to be thinking about, that's going to be the thing in 5 years. That's going to be the thing. Because then you're going to move differently than you will if you are thinking about it as like, well, I'll just do this somewhere on the side of my other thing that's making me lots of money. You won't grow to be the person who can have that successful business if you don't have that idea.
Yeah, what you're saying is reminding me of the power of envisioning. Having a vision, it can be called many things, but, and we will have to go more in depth on this another time, but the power of envisioning what you want to achieve, whether it's for your business, for your own life, for your family, for your community. I think having something to strive for is really good. And it ties into a couple of things that you're talking about, whether it's the the hobby that you have that is an actual hobby, or if you have a side hustle, or if you have a business. I think, yeah, I think for me, that's the takeaway of what you're saying, is
Mm-hmm.
have a vision for what it is you're working towards.
Well, that definitely helps with managing your time, because that also helps with managing your priorities, which is really what time is about.
Yeah.
So, can I talk a little bit about the 6 steps to managing time? Or do we have more on this like 3 by 3 by 3 dumbass article from
Well,
Nids?
I am glad you asked, because I have three more questions for you. No, I don't. But before we leave this article, I want to know, was there anything in it that you liked?
I like that you brought it up so I could talk shit about it. I appreciate you bringing me things I can shit on. I do. It makes me
Uh,
feel especially awesome. No, I
Chris,
honestly,
here's a bucket. Why don't you go ahead and just shit all over it?
yeah, I no, I mean honestly, like I think it is a trap. Like a lot of people will may look at this and think, oh, that makes sense. Especially if you're like, if I'm googling LinkedIn or going on LinkedIn looking for time management advice, and this pops up, and if I don't know any better, I might think, well, that's the way to success, or that's the way I should think about it. And there is something to be said about having categories of like, yes, you should be thinking about family, friends, and faith. You should be health, hygiene, and hobby, because I have hobbies too. I have this, but it's just not the same as a hobby. Like I have a podcast I am doing as a hobby that is not this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's where I play D&D, it's on the side. And hey, that might pop off, but I'm not responsible for it. It's another guy's podcast that I'm just on. I get to show up and fuck around and have fun. That's a hobby. This is like I'm building something with you over the course of time. It's different, right? And so there's soul, service, and smile. I agree. Smile. Not enough people spend their time smiling. And I used to go around my office all the time and I just point at people and like push their face up. And I'd be like, go like this. And I would make them smile because you know what? When you smile more, you cause your brain to be happier. It is. It's just part of it. And you know what? It winds up framing your face, okay, in a very poor way when you get to your 60s if you spend your days just like
Frowning.
ugly face. And I mean, I'm going to call my brother out about this, but my brother's been frowning for the last like 20 years or something, and now he's every time he looks around, he's much older than me. He's like 19 years older than me or something like that, but he's like just has a mug that makes him look unhappy. And you know what? You're just gonna, if you go walking around looking unhappy, you're gonna feel unhappy, and other people are gonna treat you like you're unhappy, and they're gonna give you a wide berth, and it's
I'll
just
probably
not,
be
it's
unhappy
not the way
around
you
you
want to
too.
be.
Yeah.
So there's one thing I like in this article. It tells you to smile, and I think I could get behind that for every single person who's listening to this. Spend your year smiling this year.
Yeah, I dig that. I agree. So, what is this 6 principles to time management you wanted to talk about?
I want to say, Chet Holmes, if you haven't read The Ultimate Sales Machine, you should. It's on audiobook as well. I read this a long time ago when I was running my own office, and it's by far the best sales book I have ever read, and it's amazing.
So,
So,
we'll put this
highly
behind
recommend.
the Patreon of your 6 principles here.
My stolen 6 principles on how to do this. Well, here's the thing. There's 6 like good time management should not take long. And it doesn't need a lot of tracking. It doesn't need a lot of things like what you're talking about. It doesn't need a lot of details either for it to be effective. But you do need these strategies. And there are 6 simple, easy strategies that I really like. And I know this because I implemented them. Like when I was running a business, and this was a 6-figure plus business, like multi 6-figure business. Okay. It's not, you can't get by at that level by being average in terms of your time management. At any point, I had tons and tons of hours of things and priorities that had to happen, multiple departments, multiple people, different things I was responsible for. It's really important, and it's so easy to not get things done or not be efficient. And if you don't get to the point of growing to the point where this is actually implemented, like this was one of the one things that made a huge difference for me, at least when I was running my offices, and got it to the point where it's like, okay, I can handle this. I got this. And so I want to be able to share that with you.
I'm
And
waiting.
if you do,
I'm waiting.
and if you, I'm talking about the listener, not you, Frank.
Share it with me too.
Well, I'm going to, but for those of you who really want to know, all right, I'll give you, how about this? I'll give one, maybe two. Maybe I'll give 2 of these. And if you want the remaining 4, you got to go to our
You're
Patreon.
such a
Does that sound good?
tease. You're such a
Okay.
tease.
All right. Let's just go with the first one.
All
The
right,
first
fine.
one.
I'll take what I can get.
The first one is touch it once. All right. So this is a very simple principle, but have you ever, like, okay, you're going through your emails. Email is a good example of this, right? And you're going through your emails and you're like, oh, I'll respond to that later. Oh, I'll respond to that later. Oh, I just don't have time to write out the whole response to this. I'll just go back to that, that kind of thing. And so if you spend 15 minutes a day revisiting things that you said you were going to do later, that actually costs you 97 hours per year.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things in that can be really, and plus that doesn't even count in all the things you forget to come back to because you forgot it. And that costs you money too. And it costs your people money. So if you instill this into you and your organization and you really train people on this, you trickle down this efficiency. It's a really simple one. And I'll tell you, if you touch it, take action on it. So that means don't open that email or text until you're able to deal with it. Don't go look at your bill unless you're able to pay it or ready to pay it right then. Do you know what I mean? So you have to, and this means that when you go in there and I look at an email, I'll just like, okay, I'm going to respond to it right now. Because if I have to come back to it, it's just going to get lost on my inbox. When you have hundreds of emails coming in on a regular basis, you're going to lose it. So touch it once. Okay. And the thing I tried to instill in my organization, and I have less control where I'm at right now, but in our organization, I know that this is something we do fairly well, is we try to put in subject lines that are pretty descriptive of what this email is about so that I can know, and you can know, do I want to deal with this right now? And does this have to be dealt with right now? Or how much time will this take? So very descriptive subject lines in an email, for example. I try to train people in my life. It's like, hey, tell me what your text is about in like one line at the top, and then put the context below. Because if you do that, it allows me when I'm looking through my text to be like, okay, I have time to handle that and respond to that and do that. So let's do that. Now, again, may not work for partners and stuff. I don't demand that of everybody in my life, but people I work with, I prefer if they give me something that gives it a little bit of like context before I go forward. And here's the thing: one interruption, as they have said, can cost you many, many minutes of refocusing. Whether it's 45 minutes or 5 minutes, if you're frank, somewhere in between is usually where people are at in terms of refocusing. So touch it once, deal with it, and then move on.
I,
Like
I
then it's
really
good.
like that. You mentioned something that reminds me of something I try to practice, which is specifically around emails, because that can be the time killer. And talking about like, you see it, I'll reply to it later. Absolutely a reality for me at times. So my thing is, okay, I will look at my emails near the start of my day to see if I need to budget in any urgencies to what else I want to accomplish. And then I'll look at them again at the end of the day to see if anything else came up. But between that, I work very hard to not open my inbox. I will look at things as they come in on my phone occasionally and see, like you said, a good subject line telling me if something's urgent. And if I need to get more information because it's a vague subject line, then I on my phone have a nice thing where I can like open it up so I just see the first sentence, and that helps me determine whether it's urgent or not. But even then, it is like that's even a little more than I would like to do. I would prefer to just, I carve that time out, whether it's 15, 30 minutes in the morning to tackle emails and another 15 to 30 minutes at the end of the day to tackle emails. I really like that, just
Mhm.
touch it once.
Touch it once. That's point number one. Is that enough, or should we go into the Patreon?
I'm good. I'm satisfied.
All right.
I am
I'll give you one more, and then
satiated.
and I'll give you one more, and then we can take the rest over to
Ooh,
Patreon. All right.
dessert.
So
Okay.
number two, and I know when I say this, some of you are going to be like, "That's it. That's it." Make lists. Make lists. Now, here's the thing: most people think lists and they're like, lists just stress me out, or lists just make me. Here's the thing: keep a list. All right, lists keep you focused on tasks. First off, if you're not productive, make a list of everything that you have to do. That is a great thing to do. But how many items do you have on your list when you do lists, Frank? Generally, is it like, have you ever had like 10, 20, 30 items on a list? You know what I'm talking
Like a
about?
grocery list, yeah, sometimes books I want to
No,
read, movies I want to
tasks,
watch. Oh,
tasks.
okay.
No, tasks. We're talking about productivity
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
man.
yeah. No, I definitely have long ass lists, and I use Trello sometimes, little product plug, but I actually stopped using Trello a while ago, and I have I call it my work OS, my dashboard at work. So long answer to your question is yes, I often will have a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, let me give you some context for lists. So, make lists, they do make things more efficient. It gets it out of your head onto paper, which allows you to then not go around in circles. Because one of the things I've noticed is most of the time when we have like 17 things to do, we're like go around in circles being like, oh, I got to pay this bill. I got to respond to this email. I got to, do these dishes. I got to respond to this email. I got to do this dishes. I got to do this. And your brain is circular. Like it goes back and forth and you keep having the same thing. So you never actually get things done because you keep getting pulled in different directions. When you write them all down, you realize like, oh, I only got these 4 things I really have to do. So writing it down gets it out of your head. One of the most important things to do is just get things that have to get done out of your head onto a paper. Second thing about making a list, though, this is kind of a subheading of make list, have 6 things each day.
On the list that you're going to accomplish?
6 things each day to get done. Okay. And this is like by hook or by crook, you're going to get these 6 things done. Okay. And so it really is like you want to make sure that when you go through all of your, say, list of tasks, you pick out the 6 things that are really most important for you to do. Right now, this is going to vary based sometimes on your role, on the day, on the circumstances, all sorts of things. Right. But for example, if I were running a business where it was dependent on creating new clients, one of the most important things I would be needing to do is prospecting, right? And so getting new clients in, that's probably what you need to be spending at least some of your time doing every single day if you're running some sort of sales organization or sales opportunity. And that means putting in like, what are the key number one thing? It might be like getting my ads up, or it might be creating the next piece of content, or it might be reaching out to new prospects or following up with current prospect, like whatever that is. But you have to have that, like, what is the most important thing? And what this does is only focus on 6. You know why that helps is because then you have to pick the most important things. It gives you a priority list out of the massive list of things that you might say you have to do. You just take the top 6 for your day. And that is something you take every single day.
Very
Like
proactive. Yeah.
people, if you take top 6 every day and you put it into your task list and you just focus on that 6 and focus on getting those things, that incremental daily progress, I'm telling you, you will be blown away by what you get accomplished in a month, in a year. Okay. It is incredible. Top 6. It was a game changer when you say make lists.
Yeah, it reminds me of what we do at my work, which is we have a one thing. The one thing, the surprisingly simple truth about extraordinary results. Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
And here's the Off Balance book, by the way.
Oh, Off Balance, Matthew Kelly.
Yeah, Matthew Kelly. It's great.
Nice. Yeah. So I mean, the one thing is not 6 things. I can appreciate that, but as far as like having that one thing you need to accomplish, it's really good, especially for managing a team and making sure that everyone's going to be accomplishing something. But yeah, I like those.
Yeah. Well, let's cut over to the Patreon side. So if you listen to this right now, and if you want to get the rest, the remaining 4, jump on to Patreon at patreon.com/nerdpreneur, and we'll be posting it there. But in the meantime, everybody,
Keep it nerdy.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy.